Alright guys, it's Starfield time. After years of waiting for a new Bethesda game, Starfield is finally here. A little history about me: a lot of my subscribers think I'm a Bethesda guy because I've posted a few Skyrim videos, but truth be told, I've only played and actually enjoyed a few Bethesda games. Now don't get me wrong, Skyrim is definitely in my top 10 favorite games, but aside from that, a lot of the other Bethesda titles I've played haven't really stuck with me afterwards. I really loved Fallout New Vegas. I think it's got an incredible story with amazing side quests and world building, but I'm not really a big first-person shooter kind of guy, so while I did appreciate the VAT system spicing things up a little bit, it's not really a game I'd go back and play again. Oblivion was okay, but by the time I got around to playing it, it was a bit too outdated and slow for my liking. But regardless of all of this, I do like what Bethesda brings to the table when it comes to RPGs, and I was still pretty excited to see what Starfield had in store. Thousands of unique planets to explore, hundreds of quest lines with branching paths, new companion characters with deep storylines, and a brand new world full of futuristic NASA punk tech. Bethesda went very ambitious with this game, but did it all pay off in the end? Is Starfield worth your time? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Look, here's what I'll say to preface all of this. Starfield is definitely a Bethesda RPG, okay? If you've played Elder Scrolls or Fallout, you probably know what to expect. There's tons of dialogue and lore and a skill tree and everything you've come to expect in a Bethesda game. To some, including myself, this will be a good thing. If you already love how Bethesda structures their games, you'll probably find something familiar to love about Starfield. To others, this is going to feel a bit like a step backwards. Again, it's very by the numbers of what you can expect from these games, and if you were hoping for something completely new, you're probably not going to find it here. I know that a lot of people were excited to hear that Bethesda was using a new engine for this game, since they've been using the same engine for many years and for many games, but if you play Starfield, it's not going to be that noticeable. To give you an example, there are still a lot of loading screens for every building you enter, and even just entering your own ship, which is something that hasn't been the norm for a while now. No Man's Sky, for example, a game that I'll be comparing Starfield to a lot, barely has any noticeable loading screens, and that game came from an indie studio back in 2016. Now obviously, I know the level of detail and NPC population is a huge factor, and of course I understand the graphic fidelity and performance is tough to get right for such a big game. However, when we've had massive games like Baldur's Gate 3 and Final Fantasy 16 also come out this year, it's tough to not be a little disappointed. With that in mind, Starfield is very Bethesda coded. Its shortcomings are unfortunately nothing new for these games. But then again, and really the only reason why I was able to look past a lot of this, is if you like Bethesda games, this will all feel familiar to you. The dialogue system is the same as it has been since Fallout 3, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. They found a style that works, and when something isn't broke, don't fix it, right? The level of detail is definitely nothing to scoff at as well. Walking around the cities feels exciting, and the intricate ships are very impressive to look at. I guess to sum all of this up, if you're going into Starfield wanting to dive right back into a new Bethesda RPG, you're gonna get one. Now, preface over. Although I said I have an appreciation for the way Bethesda makes games, I personally did not enjoy Starfield. As ambitious and full of content this game is, I found it very disappointing and hollow. Every time I saw a new mechanic, I could only think about the fact that I've seen other games do it better. For example, Starfield's biggest inspiration is clearly No Man's Sky. From its mining system to its space exploring to the thousands of randomly generated planets, it's taken a lot of ideas directly from this game. The problem is, even though Bethesda had 500 developers working on Starfield, and Hello Games only had 6 developers for the majority of development, and ended up with 15 employees by the end, No Man's Sky is still better at pretty much every aspect of their game. Take a look at the spaceships. In No Man's Sky, you can seamlessly fly from a planet's surface to space and all the way to another planet and land and get out and explore and fly away again with 0 loading screens all throughout. In Starfield, everything is a loading screen and menus. In order to go up to space, you gotta enter your ship. That's a loading screen. You gotta take off. That's a cutscene and then another loading screen. If you want to fly to another planet, well, the only way to do that is to open up your menu and look at a map. For a game that prides itself on being immersive, there's certainly a lot of menus and UI to take you out of the experience. At the beginning of the game, I would board my ship manually anytime I wanted to go to a new planet because it just felt more immersive that way, and then I'd waste about 5 minutes going through the menus and eventually land on a new planet. But here's the thing, you literally have the option to teleport to any planet right from the start menu without even so much as seeing your ship. So what's the point of even having space travel in the first place? I know some people are going to be rolling their eyes because maybe loading screens aren't a big deal to you, and, you know, fair enough, but when you know what other games are able to achieve these days, how can you not expect more from one of the biggest studios on the planet? Speaking of planets, one of Starfield's biggest selling points, and I put selling points in quotations because it's not really, it's just what they repeated the most, is the thousands of planets you can explore in the game. Each planet is different with interesting landmarks and ruins to explore, different species to find, and all that. The reality is that there are really only like 8 planets in the whole game that are worth visiting. Once you've seen a procedurally generated planet, you've basically seen them all. I don't even think the idea of having procedurally generated planets is all that interesting, because again, we saw it done way better in No Man's Sky already. I think Starfield's biggest problem is that they chose quantity over quality way too many times. Just because there's 1,000 places to visit doesn't make them all worth visiting. You'll come across the occasional randomly generated outpost or quest line, but that gets pretty tiring after a while, especially when 95% of these planets are just walk over here and then walk back. It's all so tedious and mind-numbing fluff, and there's so much fluff that it suffocates every other part of the game that's actually worthwhile. The gunplay is serviceable and feels solid enough, but it's the same thing really. There's no depth to it. It's not snappy or accurate like Call of Duty or Valorant, and it's not innovative like the VAT system in Fallout. It's just shooting different guns like any other first-person shooter game. The only mechanic with gunplay I can think of that feels new in Starfield is the low gravity jumping and jetpacking, which, I won't lie, is a fun highlight for the game, but it's not really enough to make the combat feel meaningful. Now, I will say this is pretty biased of me, but I also just don't really find the whole NASA punk aesthetic that intriguing. Take a game like Fallout. It's this really cool mix between bright and colorful 50s nostalgia and grim and disgusting nuclear wastelands. Starfield is like that, but only if you took out everything except for the grim and disgusting parts. This whole game is all just gray and white and brown, and it's all just so unappealing to look at. I know this could just be me, but even looking at a game like Cyberpunk, which was borderline unplayable upon release, at least they had a really cool backdrop with interesting lore. Starfield is literally just modern technology, but we're in space now. There are so many ways it could have been cool too, but without going into details that I would probably consider spoilers, I just think it's kind of a wasted opportunity. What I'm getting at here is that Starfield is painfully mid in every sense of the word. It's not terrible or broken, it's just a disappointing game from a company that might be past its prime. It hurts to say it because if you know me, I love Skyrim so much. My most anticipated game of all time until this point has probably been Elder Scrolls 6, and honestly, Starfield left a very bad taste in my mouth. I'm worried that if Bethesda stays on this path of doing everything by the books and not taking risks and focusing solely on innovating quantity instead of quality, Elder Scrolls 6 will probably end up being disappointing as well. However, if you heard everything I have to say and still just want to play another Bethesda classic, you'll probably like it. It's everything a Bethesda game has proven to be up until this point, and unfortunately, It looks like it has nothing else it wants to prove going forward. I wanted to love it, but unfortunately, it didn't want to love me back. That's about it. Subscribe for more videos, hopefully a more positive one next time, and yeah, see you later.